Ladies, gentlemen, and everybody else, welcome back to the Tales of Hope podcast. I am your host, Nick McNamara, and today we have a very special episode. This is not our typical one. We're not doing building history. We're not doing an interview. No, this is kind of a best of, in a way. So, for those of you who aren't a part of the Hope community, the students just recently ended the fall semester. Last Friday, the 14th, I believe. They took the last exams, did whatever they needed to, and yeah, Hope is now a ghost town. If you saw my Instagram, I took a picture of an empty part of campus. Not all of campus, obviously, but still, it's empty compared to what it was during the school year. So, I'm not going to try to bring anybody on. I'm not going to try to sit down and do anything, in terms of building history, because I am actually going out of town tomorrow, and I will be back on New Year's Eve. So, I can't exactly interview somebody, and I'm going to be at home with family, so not exactly going to be, trying to do building history. I'm just going to kind of let this, after today, we are going on a little bit of a break, longer than what we did for Thanksgiving. It will be about 2-week break? Yeah. So about 2 weeks, we will go on break. There won't be any episodes going up. Not taking a break from social media. I will still be active, posting stuff on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, that stuff. Which, by the way, if you do not follow the podcast on social media, pause this episode right now and go do that. That is Facebook. You can find us, Tales of Hope Podcast. Just search it. You'll find us. Instagram and Twitter, you can find us at Tales of Hope Pod. All lowercase, no underscores, just one word. And YouTube as well, you can just search Tales of Hope Podcast and you will find us on there. But, like I said, YouTube, that's not really going to matter because we're not posting anything on there. Social media is what matters the most, I would say, because that way you'll know when we're coming back with another episode. I am actually excited for next semester. Hopefully going to work on a new intro at some point. Maybe, you might be hearing voices that you've heard in these past episodes, not just me. So, keep an ear out for that. If that happens, the way I'm hoping it would happen, I will actually post that intro by itself on the social media, so that way you all can hear it that way first. Let me know what you think, if there are any changes that would need to be made to it, and then from then on, I will start using that in the episodes. But, if you remember, I believe it was 2 episodes ago? Yeah, the Science Center. I think it was the Science Center, yeah. I talked about wanting to start up a second podcast to go along with this one. I'm not going to be ditching this one. I will be running 2, which is going to be kind of difficult, but the second one is something that I really like. I've been big into sports, watching mainly, not so good at playing, but all my life, and so I want to do a sports podcast. Kind of always wanted to do that, and I was actually wanted to host a sports show when I was a student at Hope on the student-run radio station. That was something that I wanted to do, didn't work out, but, everything happens for a reason. So, I want to do a sports podcast called Busted Sports, and it's going to be looking at, what us sports fans refer to as busts. So, I've been running a poll on my personal Facebook, wanting to know, who our first episode in that should be. Either one of the most famous NBA draft busts, former number 1 overall pick Michael Olowokandi, or second overall pick, and I can't remember the draft, I'll have to look. It's in the 90s, I believe. Tony Mandarich. Do if you follow sports, they're two big name busts. So I would cover one of them. I'm not going to say who. The poll is still going, but it's kind of a landslide right now, shockingly. But I would just talk about their life and, kind of their athletic history and what made them a bust. So getting involved in crime, just poor playing ability for their position or the era that they played in some cases, poor work ethic, stuff like that. So I will hopefully be getting that started around the same time that we come back to this. So maybe first full week in January, that week of, I think, was that the 7th maybe, something like that. So keep an eye out. I will post about that on the social media pages when that's official. And yeah, so as I said, this is a best of, quote unquote. I picked 1, 2, 3, 4. I have 6 little excerpts from 3 episodes. So these are going to be in order. 2 excerpts from the second interview I did with Coach Brian Morehouse. 2 excerpts from the episode after that with Chaplain Paul Boersma. And then 2 excerpts from the episode after that one with librarian Mike Donato. So I just picked these because I felt they were interesting or funny or, just moments that I genuinely enjoyed, talking about with my guests. So, for example, if you've listened to these episodes already, you would recognize, like, with Coach Mo, we talk about his, I guess, courting his wife and their whole relationship arc, I guess you could say. Like, Mike, his wine story of how he used wine he compared wine to librarians and his application to the Illinois Librarian School Academy, I believe it was called. So just, episodes moments like that. So we are going to start off with Coach Morehouse. These first 2 clips are going to be from him. So like I said, 6 clips, 3 episodes, so it's going to be 2 clips from each episode. And I'm just going to I will do the 2 Coach Morehouse clips, the 2 Paul Boersma clips, the 2 Mike Donato clips, with me kind of talking in between a little bit. So without further ado, let's get started. This first clip is, as I said, from Coach Morehouse's episode, and I left this first part in of him kind of walking through his schooling, just a little bit, but then talking about when he started at Hope and was living in the guest house at the president's house. So without further ado, here's Coach Morehouse.
It all started at Cedar Street Elementary School, Fremont, Michigan. Took the long road to Fremont Middle School and then Fremont High School. Graduated in 1987 and decided that I was going to go to college. Looked around at a bunch of different schools. Decided that I was going to follow 2 of my better friends and go to Calvin. And so I committed to Calvin. Made it through part of that summer and had an epiphany that probably wasn't where I should go, and ended up at Hope College. Was fortunate enough that a guy named Dr. Jim Beckering was the director of the admissions office and vice president of the college at the time, and he's a Fremont guy. And I called him up and said, you know what, I made a mistake. I've had a change of heart. However you formulate that question of, can I still come to Hope College? And he said, we don't have any housing. That's bad news, but you can live in my basement or we'll figure something else out. I lived in the president's guest house. When I first moved on campus, that was a pretty big mistake on the part of Hope College. I lived there with probably 5 other guys who, also made their decisions late. A couple of those guys to this day still remain good friends of mine. And I was, it was a little bit like accounting, that, you know, if you were, if they wanted you out of there, then they would kick you out into the dorms first. And luckily for me, you know, I was the last in, but I was the last out, which is not an accounting method. And so they told me that I had to move to Durfee Hall. I didn't want to move to Durfee Hall because I was staying in the president's guest house, and well, it was carpeted and it was really nice. And
the VIP treatment.
Yeah, I mean, what more could you ask for? I had the whole house to myself at that stage. Everybody else had moved out. So I just pretended that they didn't ask me. And so I squeezed another week actually out of the president's guest house. And finally somebody came in and they said, listen, dude, like, we got like guests of the president that are coming in and you can't be here anymore. So, you know, I packed up my bags and I trucked it, you know, across campus to Durfee Hall and moved in. And, you know, I set my stuff down and I look up and, you know, there's a guy with hair halfway down his back and, you know, he's listening to Metallica and Black Sabbath. And, you know, I'm from Fremont, so we weren't allowed to listen to that stuff. And I was like, oh, this is not going to be good. And he played on the soccer team, and his name was Steve Elanius. And 2 doors down and across the hallway lived Eric Lanning. And, you know, long story short, stood up in Steve's wedding. He stood up in my wedding. We lived together for 4 years. Eric Lanning became my best friend. To this day, we talked last night. We still talk multiple times a week. We started a foundation together. And yeah, I mean, Hope has been good to me.
So I don't know about you all, but I think that would be kind of cool to live in the president's basement. Or, sorry, not the president's basement, the president's guest house. That'd be really cool, wouldn't it? I mean, you know, like I said to Mo in the episode, it's like the VIP treatment that you're getting right there. So, that was kind of cool to hear about, you know, just what that was like. Even though he had originally decided on another school, he wanted to come to Hope. And, you know, they moved some things around, they helped him out, and they made it work. So, if that doesn't say something positive about Hope, I don't know what does. That is a testament to them trying to make things work for everybody, not just, you know, high-profile people that might be come through. They try to help everybody. So, that was that. This next clip this was my favorite part from the interview I did with him, and actually, when I was coming up with clips from certain episodes that I wanted to talk about, this was one that I definitely wanted to talk about, and when I listened back, I laughed at all the same moments that I was laughing at during the interview, because it was just as funny as I remember it was before. So, yeah, this next clip is what I called in the interview dating tips with Mo, dating advice with Mo. It was something like that. This is hilarious. It's still something that I can't quite believe. It's kind of unbelievable. It'd have to be, you know, let's make a time machine, let's go back in time to that, and be there and witness it for ourselves. This is Coach Morehouse's, I guess, relationship arc, I guess you could say, with his wife, Liz. Let's have a listen.
Well, the college won't be happy to know this, but I was in my first year in the admissions office, and there was this girl named Kristen Cooper.
Okay.
And since my sophomore year, Kristen Cooper had cut my hair, which is tremendously ironic if we were on videotape right now, because I have no hair. I shaved my head because I have no hair. And but so I stayed in touch with her, and we became really good friends, right? And I had this dog. His name was Chewbacca. His full name was Chocolate Thunder Chewbacca Mo. He was a 90-pound chocolate lab, and he lived with me. And again, I lived with soccer guys, right?
Right.
And so I would take Chewbacca with me, and I'd go watch the soccer games, right?
Yeah.
So I got my dog with me there, and you of course can't sit in the stands, and we were pretty good back then, and or just he and I are basically hanging out, laying on the ground, on the grass, and Cooper comes walking up, and and she said, I said, Cooper, Christian, I said, I need a haircut, and I didn't even notice who she was with, and my wife tells me to this day that we had a incredibly brief conversation. She pet my dog, and then she kept going. I don't remember it. So when they say love at first sight, I don't think so. So I go over there to get my hair cut, and Christian's nice enough to cut it for me, and Liz comes walking out, and we're just sitting there around their table at I don't know, one of the cottages across from Scott and Lichty. Okay. So we're there, and get my hair cut, and Liz comes out. We're talking, we're chatting it up with she and Kristen. I'm like, yep, I gotta go. So I drive home. I'm living out on Lake Michigan at the time in a cottage in Castle Park, which ironically is where The Wizard of Oz was either written or something like that. Yellow Brick Road. And I remember picking up the phone, not my cell phone, because we didn't have them back then.
Right.
I picked up the phone with the wire to the wall, and I remember calling up Coop, and I said, Coop, who's that girl that was there today? And she goes, oh, that was Liz. And I go, huh. And I said, and she goes, what? And I go, I don't suppose that she would have a boyfriend right now or anything like that, or you think she'd be open to going out and getting something to eat? And she goes, well, I don't know. Why don't you ask her? And she hands her the phone, and I was like, I'm immature, stumble over my words, and by the grace of God, she agreed to go out to eat with me, and I made it into the longest date of all time.
Really?
I was like, okay, we're going to go get something to eat. Let's see how this goes. And then I'll get her home. If it's not going good, like we're getting the train off the tracks before we crash, right? And so I was like, oh, dinner was pretty good. Like, very pretty girl, incredibly intelligent, can have a conversation, funny. I was like, I was thinking we'd also go to this place called Maze Craze. So back in the day, there was this place, and you could like walk through this big maze. It was this huge building. You go through this maze, you time yourself and see how fast you get through.
That's kind of cool.
So I was like, okay, that's cool. I mean, this is going pretty well. We want this to keep going.
Right.
It's if this was poker, we'd be slow playing it right now, right? Like slow playing it, not showing your hand.
Right.
So we do that, and I was like, all right, that went pretty good. I was like, maybe she'll go to a movie with me tonight too. So I said, hey, want to go to a movie? We went to one of the worst Christmas movies ever. I don't even remember, to this day, I don't remember the name of it. It was horrible, but it extended our date another 2 hours, right? And so then I'm like, I could show her that I'm a high roller, and I could show her like that I live out at Lake Michigan. So I was like, I'll take her to Castle Park, and like I'll show her Lake Michigan.
As any young guy would do.
As any young guy who thinks that actually matters would do. So I take her out there, and we go to the overlook, and, I'm like, yeah, this is, I have a place right up there, and, I didn't tell her that my sister lived with me at that moment. Of
course not.
Yeah, so then we do that. It ends up pretty good, and I say, classic. I'm like, hey, I thought this went pretty good. I hope that you enjoyed yourself. I'd like to go out again if you'd be interested. So then we go out on date 2 and date 3, and as any stupid young male would do, we get to Christmas time, and I go home for Christmas break. And what you're supposed to do in that situation is you're supposed to continue the conversation. You're supposed to call. You're supposed to show, that you care, and all this stuff. Not me. I'm scared of, I'm scared of relationships. I'm scared of commitment, as any male is. And so I just don't call her for 4 days, 5 days,
Right.
And so, so anyway, I get back and she's like, dude, what the heck? I was like, kind of busy, but luckily she gave me grace and we kept dating. And, then it was, about 13 months later, I think, what, 5 months, probably 4 months before, I was like, I think this is the one.
Mm-hmm.
I think I should get married. I think I should ask her, how do you do this? I don't know. I'm clueless. So I somehow thought it would be a good idea after I bought this ring to rent a Santa suit, drive to Carson City with my mother and my sister in the car as support, and write on the way over there a poem asking her to marry me. And somehow I thought that this was going to work. Luckily, she felt so bad for me that she said yes. We got married that August, and this summer was 25 years. You cannot make stuff like that up, Nick.
I'm going to call this dating tips with Mo.
No, because it won't work. It will not work. Only if you have a person with the patience of my wife, who is the only person that could have married me. Mm-hmm. When they say that there's someone for everyone, what they don't tell you is that for some of you, there is an only one. And she is the only one that possibly could have married me and put up with me for 25 years. Oh. So there is the life of me relationally.
It's one of those things where it sounds too made up, but it's not. Like I was saying, we would have to build a time machine, go back to when all that was happening to witness that in person, just so we can know, hey, he wasn't lying. All this stuff actually happened. But, Mo, if you ever listen to this, I just want to say, A, you're amazing. B, you've been just a great friend and mentor to me this whole, 5 years as a student, and even now that I'm working there. I already know, hopefully you know this, but you've had a huge impact on my life. It was an honor to have you on the show as one of the first couple guests as well. So, thank you again, and yeah, I hope you do end up listening to this. These next 2 clips are from Chaplain Paul Boersma, who was the next interview that we did. You're going to notice the audio quality is a little different. For those of you who didn't listen to it before, we recorded this on the front porch of the Keppel House, which is the current home of Campus Ministries. They will actually be moving to a new building coming up. Actually, they have begun construction work on there, and actually the foundation is starting to get put up. If I remember it, next time I'm on campus and I'm over near that area, because it's not on my side of campus where I work, so I would have to go for a walk, but I will try to remember to take pictures of it and post those, because it's the beginning of something new, something exciting, and a new home for Campus Ministries, because, no offense, but they do need it. Where they're at right now is too small to house the staff that they need. So, I'm looking forward to that being built. Anyways, this is Paul Boersma's story of growing up during the Civil Rights Movement. So, you'll hear him talk about it, and he talks about, this little bit starts, I believe, if I remember right, the year Martin Luther King Jr. was killed. So that tells you the time frame in which all this is happening. Just crazy race riots, all the fighting and just all the political aspects of it as well that were happening. So this is Boers talking about growing up with this and the integration that was going on at the time.
So,
here comes a nice cement truck, though.
Oh, gosh. We might want to wait for this one to pass. Oh. All right, I think we're good now.
Yes.
So you said Ottawa Hills.
Ottawa Hills Indians, yes.
So what was that like?
You know what? Interesting time that I went to high school at Ottawa. This was just coming off the civil rights movement. That's how old I am. So, this was in I started school in 1968. That's the year Martin Luther King was assassinated. Mm-hmm. The country was in a lot of turmoil, Vietnam War, civil rights movement. There was the feminist movement was going on. So a lot of happenings and changes at that time. I was just started school at that point. But when I got into high school, the kind of the racial tensions were probably at an all-time high.
Okay.
I was Ottawa Hills. My class was about 560. So the school was over 2,000 students.
Wow.
40% of the student population at that time was African American.
Okay.
The other was mostly white, Caucasian. But that's so interesting. So the time I got to 12th grade, 40% of my high school was African American. When I started kindergarten in 1965-ish, right in there, mm-hmm. my elementary school had no African American families there.
Wow.
So over my span of starting in kindergarten to 12th grade, there was a major, at least in the Grand Rapids city population, they called it white flight. If you do history, a lot of white families were moving out of the city because more families of color were moving mm-hmm. into the to the city, and there was a undue kind of anxiety with people who just there was a lot of fear,
yep.
with
right.
Integration of the schools. Mm-hmm. So when I started 7th grade, again, you can read this in the history book, I feel that old, they started mandatory busing in the Grand Rapids public schools, which meant they started busing white kids to kind of majority African American schools in the city, and African American students were being bused into majority white community areas. And
gotcha.
That was a very tense time for me as I was growing
mm-hmm.
up. But the other way, it was even more personal because my dad served on the school board.
Okay.
And so he was making a lot of these decisions at the time. And so we really lived with, this whole mandatory busing that was going on, which long term it was great and needed to happen.
Right.
But short term there was a lot of tension involved and a lot of violence in the city.
Definitely an interesting time to be growing up, and not an easy time to be growing up either for anyone. So that was growing up during the Civil Rights era. And this next segment is him talking about, this is going to be weird to hear when you think of a chaplain, but his time in a fraternity. He was an Arcadian for the people from the Hope community who know the fraternities. He was a part of that. He talks about, the differences between frat life then versus, what we know frat life to be now. And he gives not just the fraternities, but athletes and all of us in general a call to action to make ourselves and our community better than what it is now, because there's no hiding it, no trying to sugarcoat it. It's not the best. So give this a listen. Maybe this will touch you in a way that you decide, hey, I want to get involved with, changing things on campus. And yeah, so let's hear Boers talk about fraternity life and what not just they, but everyone needs to do to help make the community better?
What else did I didn't do the pole, didn't do Nightkerk, nothing. I was nothing artistic. But another thing I was involved in, I was a member of a fraternity.
Okay.
So
I think I've heard stories.
Hopefully Camstra is not talking
Not
again.
Camstra.
Okay.
Which one?
I was a part of the Arcadian fraternity.
Okay.
The Arcadian fraternity is much smaller than it was when I was here. So we had probably over maybe 130 guys in our fraternity.
Wow.
So my pledge class alone was 50 guys. So fraternity life and sorority life was very different 30 plus years ago at Hope. There's just so many other things to be involved in now. I think I heard somebody say there's over like 70 or 80 different student organizations, like from knitting club to outdoor club to sailing. There's just, those things didn't exist when I was here.
Okay.
So I was a member of the Arcadian fraternity, which was great, and I met some of my lifelong friends there. So, and then here's a little secret. Here's one more little thing about Boersma. I was my freshman year, believe it or not, and look it up in the records. I'm not lying.
Oh, man.
I was voted homecoming king my freshman year.
Get out of here.
What do you?
That is awesome.
I paid a lot of people off. But here's the thing. Go back in the archives. I was homecoming king as a freshman. Jane DeYoung, who's now Jane Sletta, married Stein Sletta in the kinesiology. Jane was a sophomore. And after that year, they made a policy change that homecoming king and queens could only be seniors after that. Check your record book on that.
Man, I'm going to look into that.
Dig back in the archives for that one. So those were some of the things I was involved in.
Now, are you still kind of involved with the fraternities? And
I'm not. I connect with members of different fraternities. I do see the value of fraternities and sororities, that they get connected with, organizations, which we all want to belong to something.
Exactly.
And so I think they have a good role here on campus, a valuable role on campus. But I challenge the Greek organizations a lot to say, hey, bring out all the best within an organization. But some of the things, and I'm not afraid to say this on podcasts, is some of the things that aren't healthy about fraternity life. Let's not fool ourselves, folks. A lot of drinking and a lot of sex. And I just say, hey, I'm 59. I counsel a lot of students who have had a lot of hurt and pain that are associated with excessive drinking and things that can happen beyond that. So I want to say Greek life is valued here at Hope, but I also want to challenge them, be better. Always, how can we be better? And I would say that to the athletes on campus, because there's a lot of alcohol and sexual promiscuity with athletics as well too, and I'd call them out to be better too. I'd call us all out to be better.
Man,
yeah,
we're getting deep on. I didn't realize how deep we're going to get on this.
Sorry, you're taking me down the road, baby.
You took us down this road.
I did.
Very powerful message right there from Boers to all of us. As I said, not just Greek life, not just the athletes, but to everybody, that there's always, we can always be better. We're never going to be perfect. None of us are. And we just need to become better people, better versions of ourselves every single day. So, Boers, just like with Mo, you've been in my life ever since I started. That was, fall semester of 2012. That was the day after men's night out that year, when we sat down at breakfast and you wanted to get to know me better, and you got invested in me. You invested in me just like I invested in everybody else that you've talked to on campus, and you stayed invested in me. So thank you. I really appreciate that. And now we move on to the last two segments of this best of show. And I don't want to use that, I use the term best of. I don't mean like, oh, these three these 3 episodes were the best ones that I did this semester, and everyone else sucked. No, I just mean best of in the sense that these were the, like I said, the little snippets of the episodes that I just felt were, my favorites, either because they were insightful and challenging, like both of those that we just did with Boers, very insightful, and, we got the challenge from him in the last one, or interesting and funny, like with Coach Mo, living in the president's guest house, everything that went on with him and his wife. And so, now we move on to, last but not least, the Mike Donato episode, and 2 clips, which I think are really cool. One of them because he went to middle school with current NBA champion and former NBA Finals MVP Andre Iguodala. So this first segment is him talking about that, and I mention it a little after the ending of this clip. I was saying to him, everything that he said about Iggy is just kind of reminiscent of his career right now, and everything with the Warriors after his first season being asked to take a step back and come off the bench. Like, you just kind of hear, like, ever since he was young, that was the kind of player or person in general that he was. That was, something he was okay with because it made the team better. So, this is a cool little clip about an NBA player that, it's just really cool because it's indicative of, like I said, what they're like now. So, let's give it a listen.
Growing up, played lots of sports.
Mm-hmm.
I played basketball.
Okay.
Do you follow basketball?
Oh, yeah.
NBA?
Big basketball fan.
Do you know who Andre Iguodala is?
Mm-hmm.
I played basketball with him in 6th
Get out of
grade.
here. I have an Iggy jersey.
Maybe really? No way. Yeah, he's from Springfield, Illinois.
Oh my God.
6th grade, Isles Elementary, on the blue team.
That is awesome.
Andre Iguodala. Yeah.
Holy cow.
Now NBA champion.
Mm-hmm.
And he was a really cool guy. Like, there were 2 teams in that school. There was blue and gold.
Mm-hmm.
They were fighting over Andre. Whoever had Andre was going to win. There was no question. You could tell back then, like, if anyone is going to the NBA here, it's that guy. Like, he just changed the game. Like, just long and lanky, even then, like in 6th grade, just dominated things. But what I remember the most about him is I was good, but I wasn't great.
Right. Mm-hmm.
So in our most important game, blue versus gold, our same school, we're winning. We're up.
Mm-hmm.
Andre's killing it. We're doing great. I haven't played at all. I'm okay with this. Because I wanted the team to win.
Right.
But Andre comes off for a quick breather, quick break, just as quick as we give him a little breather while we can, get him right back in.
Yeah.
He says to coach, he's like, Coach, not everybody's played. Referring to me. He's like, not everybody's played, but get him in there. And I'm like, that's totally fine, Andre. That's really, really nice of you. Like, super nice of you.
Right.
But I am totally fine with us just winning.
Right. Oh, yeah.
But I thought that was such a kind-hearted and thoughtful thing. And to have known someone who now is a millionaire, who's played with Steph Curry, who's won the NBA championship, how humble and a good person he was, even back then in the day.
And now that
Man, just how awesome is that? Growing up with somebody who now you can turn on the TV and see playing in a game. Someone who you could have turned on the NBA Finals multiple times and seen him in action. Seen him winning. What have they won? 2, 3 now? I think 3, maybe? I can't remember. They're always winning. But so that's just awesome to see that and to hear that even back then, he wasn't full of himself. He didn't, winning wasn't everything to Iggy. It was, hey, he hasn't played yet, get Mike in the game. So that's really cool. That was I just thought that was really cool, hearing that about someone who, for me, is one of my favorite players to watch. So that was that. Next up is, like I mentioned, the wine story. So this is Mike explaining, how he used his knowledge that he gained from working in the liquor store when he was younger and put that into his his application and used this comparison to kind of, I guess you could say, open their eyes, make them notice his application. So, check this out. This is the last clip of the quote-unquote best of. So, give it a listen.
So, I recently published an article on wine and librarianship and the connections and intersections between the genesis of this. My letter of application to library school.
Yep.
I talked about the similarities between wine and librarianship in my letter of application to University of Illinois.
Mm-hmm.
I don't imagine they have too many people talk about that.
That would be very unique.
You think so?
Yeah, I would say so.
So let me try to go into more detail on that. Working at the wine store, I'm a naturally curious person.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes you'd be stocking shelves. Sometimes I run wine tastings, get to try a lot of different things.
Yeah.
We got a great store discount there, so I was able to try a lot of things I wouldn't have never been able to afford otherwise,
Right.
ever, particularly as a college student and a grad
Exactly.
student. Not a lot of money. No. So I got to explore a lot of things.
Okay.
And if I were working the register
Mm-hmm.
and there was downtime, I would read the wine magazines. Just for fun, because I wanted to learn.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I started learning a little more and more about it. I started making these connections, thinking about how am I going to make my letter of application to Illinois stand out? It's
Right.
the number one library school.
Exactly.
A lot of people are going to want to apply. They have that reputation.
Yep.
They turn people away. It's selective.
Yeah.
How am I going to stand out, So I started thinking about, there's a thing called research help that we do in the library. So helping someone with their research questions. So there's a thing called a reference interview. You ask them for clarification, why they need the information,
Okay.
why they're doing these things. I started doing those with my wine customers. What's the purpose of this bottle? Is it for a party? Is it for a gift? Thinking about the same concepts there and how it interact with the person, with the patron. So making those connections, So you want this for a party? Do you want this to age? What are your goals here?
Yeah.
So I started already practicing librarianship in the wine store.
That's awesome.
Taking the ideas of librarianship and applying them to what I was doing there. That's one thing. Also, there's this concept called terroir. Terroir. It's a French word, essentially meaning like a sense of place.
Okay.
So as far as wine would go, it would be the soil, because the grapes are grown, right?
Yep.
So specific soil compositions, limestone, clay, things like that all affects the grapes. It's all going to affect, you'll taste the terroir from a specific region in France or in Germany. That's going to change the grapes. So you could have the exact same type of grape growing on one side of the river and on a different side, and you'll get different complexities because there's that terroir, the soil composition, the light, all of those things. So essentially, it gives you a sense of place, a sense of time. You have different vintages. A 2005, something will taste differently than a different vintage of the same thing. That reminded me of how a book or a story can take you to a place, to a certain time, really evoke that sense of place and take you somewhere. So that was another reason I gave, thinking about the similarities there. There's another concept called provenance. That would be where something comes from, tracking ownership of something, where a source comes from, where did this data come from, where did this information come, something you want to do in research.
Exactly.
As it relates to the wine world, it would be who produced this wine, who's owned it for a long period of time. Because even in the higher echelons of the prices, you get counterfeit wines.
Right.
These things are worth thousands of dollars. People will falsify things. So provenance, very important in the wine world. And then you have things like archival material. Where did this come from? Who produced it? Again, applying those same kind of concepts to what I'm doing. Totally unrelated subject matter. Almost done.
Oh my God. Like, I wish you guys could see. My jaw is like dropping right now. This is amazing.
Connecting to terroir, there's the appellation systems, Appellation.
Okay.
It relates to Latin appellare,
Okay.
basically meaning like to name. I think if you look at, if you're looking at your last name in Spanish, I believe it's apellido. So again, having that same Latin root.
Yep.
Appellation system. This is very important in the wine world. There are very specific places in France that produce wine, or California. California in general, right?
Yep.
And you have Sonoma, you have Napa. Within those larger regions, you have Sonoma Valley, you have Russian River Valley, and then there are even smaller microclimates in there. So that terroir, a Pinot Noir grown in Russian River, will taste completely differently than something grown in like San Luis Obispo or Santa Lucia.
Okay.
All kinds of different things like that. So these classification systems, and in Europe it's even more important because, so like Champagne, that region, very specific grapes can be grown there and called Champagne.
Okay.
In Bordeaux, very specific grapes are grown there. You have Cabernet Sauvignon, Merlot, Petit Verdot, Malbec. It can't call it a Bordeaux if it doesn't have those grapes in it. So it's a way of verifying like the quality of something.
Yep.
And as far as like champagne goes, I am pedantic. So when someone says they're drinking champagne, I'm like, is it actually from Champagne? Because if it's not from Champagne, then it's not real champagne. It's actually cava from Spain, or that's a prosecco from Italy. So like that's fun for me to poke around with that. So these classification systems, very similar to the Library of Congress classification system, which is how we organize books in the library, right? So we have these larger categories like the P's, which will be literatures and things like that, and then within them it gets more and more specific. So it's the same kind of like classification system, just applied to a different sort of thing. So I talked about all of that in a very short letter of application to library school.
Are there any books written on this subject? Because you might want to either add to that collection or start it.
I don't believe there really are. There are, I know. It's in the back of my head.
Oh yeah.
For a while now. There are wine libraries. Those exist.
Okay.
University of California, Davis has a great one. I kind of wrote that wine article and got in touch with some people there and have talked with them. And this guy, Axel Borg, he's like the distinguished food and wine bibliographer of UC
That just
Davis.
sounds like a distinguished person.
Isn't that amazing? And then Sonoma County, they have their own Sonoma wine library.
Okay.
So they'll keep like wine pamphlets, labels, all kinds of material, things related to the making of wine or grape growing, all kinds of things like that. So not a lot of people know those exist, and there's a whole weird world out there of things, and wine is really a multidisciplinary thing. You have the economics of it, you have the agricultural aspects, you have history that's involved, chemistry, biology, all the genetic things. There's a lot of different things in there. So, yeah.
This is just a good example of how, you can take two completely unrelated things, and yet, at the end of the day, you can trace them back to comparison and be like, oh, wow, this is exactly like this.
Right. And then so another thing I think about is people have been making wine for thousands of years.
Yeah.
Very much a long time.
Oh, yeah.
People have been telling stories, writing books, needing to tell stories and to get what they have written down, their memory, their legacy, to tell stories. That's very much a primordial human aspect as well. So these things are very deeply ingrained in us.
Oh, yeah.
They've been that way for thousands of years. So they're two building blocks of societies and of humanity. So it's just really interesting to think about and make those total juxtaposition, completely different things that are very much connected.
Man, I wish you all could have seen just the look on my face. If we would have had a video camera going in there, you could have seen my jaw just progressively drop lower and lower and lower at, not just the knowledge of all the wine information that Mike had, but just his ability to have taken it from, wine and say, oh, here's how this matches or, coincides with librarianship. Like, here are the similarities between them. And I'm like, at first I was thinking, well, how can you take these two? It's apples and oranges. Like, how can you say they're similar? And then at the end of it, it's like, oh my God, you're right. Like, this is very similar. So I thought that was really cool. Mike, I don't know where you came up with that idea, but that was amazing. And I hope you, are able to find ways to pass, these thoughts, these ideas on to the students who come up to you at the research desk. Because as a former home student, I don't think many of these professors have, had comparisons like that in their papers or presentations. Or it doesn't, obviously, not everyone's going to be talking about wine like that and comparing it to, a famous author or something like that. But just, your thought process and how can I take these two, very dissimilar things and show that, hey, they're actually very quite similar. I hope students are able to get that from you. And it's not like, oh, well, I hope Mike's putting in the effort to make that happen, because I don't think you have to sit there and try to force that out. It just seems so natural for you to be like, oh, well, this is like this, even though these two things are very dissimilar, this aspect of it is like this aspect of it. And then you just keep going down that rabbit hole until, boom, they're equal almost. So I don't know how you do it, but obviously, UI's library school made the right choice in accepting you. So hopefully, through our small interactions and conversations that we have, because we aren't interacting with each other as much, because I'm usually not in the library as often once you show up, but I hope I can just, absorb that kind of thought process from you in those small interactions. Anyways, guys, so this is the end of this episode, and this is the end of, I guess you could say, the fall semester of freshman year for Tales of Hope. Again, like I said at the beginning, we will be going off air until, God, I don't know. I couldn't tell you exactly the date or anything. I'm trying to get interview time set up for a few guests. Actually had one student reach out to me recently. So here's kind of a story as to how the student reached out to me. I had the opportunity to go to a Christmas breakfast, hosted by President Dennis Voskuhl, who I hope to bring on the show at some point before his term ends in, I believe, July is when he will be done. So, this is kind of a call to action to everybody. Hashtag bring Dennis on the show is what we shall call this. If you're able to help me out and pass this on to Dennis, that'd be awesome. But anyways, us staff got invited to a Christmas party that he was hosting, 2 days of it. So I went on the second day because it was on Tuesday, and that's the beginning of my work week. And I had the opportunity to sit down with Patty Carlson, who is the secretary for the dean of the library, Kelly. So hopefully one or both of them will come on the show at some point. Just saying. And we were sitting there with Greg Widener, who I believe his official title is project manager, project director. Basically, he's in charge of all the upgrades to the buildings or renovations and et cetera, from what I can gather. So, I know the library, I think it was yesterday, the library was having some changes made to the front doors and the doors leading into Van Zoren. Greg was kind of in charge of all that. So him and his assistant, Donna Essenberg, were sitting with Patty and I at breakfast, and Patty knows about the show. She asked me if they had heard about it, and I said, no. Like, that was the first time I got to sit down and talk with them. So, no, unless they discovered it on their own, they wouldn't have known about it. And no, they didn't. So I told them about what the show was about, and, we kind of talked about that. And Greg said, well, why don't you post this on Marketplace? Which, for those of you who aren't part of the Hope community, Marketplace is it's on a Hope website that only those of us affiliated with Hope can access. And I guess you could say it's like Craigslist in a way. You can sell things, you can say you're looking for things, you can, give stuff away, all that stuff. And he said, well, why don't you post about it on there? And, as Donna said, sell your brand. Which I was like, I didn't think it was going to work, but I was like, okay, I'll give it a shot. If they don't post it, then they don't post it on Marketplace. And I'll find another way to advertise for this. So, I posted it that day, and I was expecting, to receive... I received an email saying that it was under review, and I was expecting, maybe they'll send an email saying it's been approved, it's been denied, it's, something like that. Well, I didn't get that. Instead, the next morning I wake up, and I have an email from a student saying, hey, I was looking through Marketplace, saw your, ad for your podcast. Are you still looking for guests? And I'm like, I'm always going to be looking for guests. I would love to have you on. And so I said to her, obviously, this was during exam week. This was, last Tuesday, so it was during exam week. And I said, your exams are more important than the show, so when next semester rolls around, I will keep you in mind. I will reach out to you with more info, and if you're interested, we'll figure out a way to bring you on. So, they will be hopefully coming on at some point. I also have 2 other students lined up, one of whom is a very close friend of mine and helping us out cleaning in the library in the mornings. And the other was a student who he did help clean in the chapel with myself and 2 other students at the time on Saturdays. And no longer does that. There was a conflict that it was going to be too difficult for him to resolve, so we talked about it, and he said it would be best if I didn't work in the chapel anymore, and that was totally fine with us. We understood. But I saw him not too long ago, and he's like, hey, so you're running a podcast. I saw it in like the nearby section on Instagram. And so we talked about it, and I said, if you want to come on, like, that'll be awesome. So he's coming on. So that's 3 students, which, we've had 2 already, so that's awesome that we have those 3 coming on. We have a couple football coaches who have said they would come on. One of whom might be our first guest back, but we'll see. The other one is very busy right now, and if he has time to fit us into his very busy schedule, we'll make it work. So that one we're going to have to kind of hold off on. But let's see, those 2, and potentially, we're not sure yet, I haven't really heard anymore, but we might have a I believe she's now a Res Life coordinator. I've known her since her first year at Hope, because that was that summer that she came in as the Res director. I was living in her dorm as the summer housing assistant. Sorry. So, yeah. She is, maybe. Last we talked about, sounded like yes, but it was going to be a little while. So, that's what we have lined up for the future. And yeah, like I said, I'm thinking about a new intro. I will see if I can make it happen. And when I do, if, my idea ends up happening, I will let you guys be the judge of it. Tell me what you think, and we will go from there. So, I just want to take this last bit to say thank you to all of you who listen to this show. Your support really means a lot. This show, to kind of put it in perspective for you guys, we didn't really get this thing going until it was about the end of, September. End of September is when I posted this show on Anchor. So, that is anchor.fm/Tales of Hope. Just gotta plug that, because I didn't plug it at the beginning. But, so we started, end of the month then. And I was looking at the stats this morning, so maybe it's changed now, but I believe it was at 157 listens and downloads, across Anchor, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, CastBox, all of the podcast sites, apps, whatever you want to call them, that we're on. Just from that. And then there's also all the support that we've gotten on YouTube as well. So, I believe maybe 400 some views on YouTube, plus, the 157, we're looking at, 500-600 some views and listens overall within the span of, about 3 months now. That's insane for this, podcast that's kind of focused on a small niche, group of listeners. Not everyone is going to be looking for a podcast on, people of Hope College and the buildings. So the fact that we've gotten this many listens already is amazing. And I just want to thank you all again for your continued support, and I hope that you all continue listening, enjoy these episodes, and let me know what you think about this little, best of segment. Let me know if this is something that you want me to keep doing. Maybe once we bring in enough people, then we can do best of coaches, pull some segments from them. Best of librarians. Maybe if I bring some custodians on, best of custodians. Stuff like that. So, let me know what you think, and Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays. I will see you guys in the new year. And don't forget, it doesn't matter who you are, it doesn't matter where you're from, it does not matter what you do. You have a tale to tell, and you deserve to tell it. And here at the Tales of Hope podcast, that is exactly what we do. This has been your host, Nick McNamara. Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays, Happy New Year, and I will see you guys in a few weeks.